Hello, my name is Dave Zapponi, and I'm the CEO of ECHO, or otherwise known as the Educational Council of Homeowners. Thank you for participating in today's Ask the Expert webinar, HOA Management Efficiency, Tools and Solutions. As the title implies, we have invited 5 experts from various disciplines to tap into their expertise and learn from their experience and knowledge. But first, a little about ECHO. ECHO is a statewide nonprofit association established to support HOA board members and engaged homeowners. Our mission is to foster a better quality of life in community associations through education, advocacy, and connections. Now for a few housekeeping items. You will see these on your monitors. Slides were sent to the registered attendees beforehand. Please take a moment to review our housekeeping items. You will be able to ask questions directly to the speakers during the breakout sessions. I may be able to field a couple during the presentations. Please use the chat icon to report technical issues or to communicate directly with other participants during the general sessions. The chat icon can be found by hovering over the bar at the bottom of the screen. And now for our disclaimer. None of what is said during the seminar shall be construed as specific legal or expert advice from the speakers, sponsors, or ECHO. If you wish specific advice, specific about your HOA association in particular, we encourage you to contact your attorney, management professional, or an appropriate expert. Today's event will be made up of 2 general sessions with 3 experts speaking in the first session and 2 experts in the second session. After each general session, we will have 5 small group breakout room sessions. The general session will include all attendees. We will divide all attendees by 5 for conversations with the individual speakers. The general sessions are designed to impart expert knowledge about various aspects of HOA management, including reserves, website management and security, project management, accounting, and assessment collections. After each general session, we will move directly into the breakout rooms where you will be able to interact directly with our speakers and ask as many questions as you would like about their products and services. During the breakout sessions, you may move out of one room and into another if you prefer. Please make sure to stay for a while for the whole program for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card courtesy of Simply Seal. The winner must be in attendance to claim the prize. Now to introduce our speakers and their companies. Our first speaker of the day is Sonia Bacchus, the CEO of Bimini Corp. Bimini Corp provides simple technology solutions for specific association challenges with no huge integrations, just quick resolutions. Following Sonia will be Dan Stondon, the CEO and co-founder of HOMI Group, Inc. HOMI is a financial planning tool that helps HOA boards plan assessments and avoid special assessments. Their unique measurement tool helps boards visualize and track their financial and reserve study data. For our third session, we have Amar Trivedi, the president of AMD LLC. AMD is an award-winning digital communications company that specializes in website management and website accessibility, ensuring a secure, full web experience regardless of user ability. Then, presenting after our first breakout session will be Tim Hoover, the founder and CEO of Simply Seal. Simply Seal is a product that redefines the bidding process for HOAs. It allows its users to create a clear scope of work, share important documents, and answer questions in a timely manner while maintaining a fair and objective sealed bid process. Finally, before our second breakout session, we will hear from Mitchell Drimmer, President, and Alisher Sabarov, Vice President of Axela Technologies. Axela platform can easily review your assessment, delinquency issues, and provide a customized collection plan for your association. Axela employs highly trained and accredited collectors who will work with your association to resolve delinquencies. Please visit each of our speakers during their breakout sessions to get more details and in-depth look at their products and services. Sonia Bacchus will be our first presenter today. She will set the stage with a presentation on the general landscape of HOAs and technology. Sonia, please take it away.
Thank you, Dave. Good morning, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you so much to ECHO for providing this forum, to the other presenters for engaging in this seminar today, and mostly to you board members. As a manager, you guys are truly the superheroes of this industry. You give your time and volunteer to make your associations better. And you are volunteering your time here today to learn and get more educated about technology and how it can help you serve your communities. So I, as manager, recognize this is a huge job. So how do we keep up? There are constant changes in association governance and state statutes, and those can be daunting. There is a new statute coming out, I believe effective January 1, 2023, SB 392, that specifically relates to technology and the utilization of websites and providing information in accurate ways to your communities. And you as board members are constantly trying to understand and learn about the changes in state governance and how that is affecting your individual communities. We also have fast-moving technology. I know that it's just amazing what technology can do and what those changes are. And I've been married to my husband for 33 years. He's in high tech. I still could barely tell you what he does. And it's just hard to keep up. There are huge integrations, lots to learn, and it can change the way that your associations need to operate. So the issue is that it can be good news. Technology doesn't have to be overwhelming. It can be empowering, and it can be simple. It can simply solve a specific challenge that you and your communities are dealing with. So look at where we are today. 2 years ago, who would have imagined that we would be where we are on this Zoom call? Nobody recognized what a valuable technology this was going to be with the challenges that we were dealing with as associations, and what a huge pivot. It always makes me think back to I believe it was a Progressive commercial where it was Flo, and they were making fun of people being on Zoom calls with, somebody being in the bathtub and somebody in their pajamas and somebody getting too close to the camera. And look at where we are now. We are utilizing this amazing tool that has really changed the way that we manage association meetings. I found as a manager, it's been hugely empowering because we are actually finding that we are getting more members attending regular board meetings because they can do it simply from their home with a cup of coffee at 9 o'clock in the morning. So here we are. So several months ago, I was listening to an interview with a professor from Yale. Her name is Zoe Chance, and she teaches a class at Yale about being an influencer in the world and how to influence your community in positive ways. And she has a section in her book. Her book is called Influence is Your Superpower. And there's a section in her book about the magic question. And the magic question is this: what would it take? And she goes on to give an example about this magic question in a story that she tells. Several years ago, there was a conference in Africa, and they were struggling with some pretty serious issues regarding child trafficking. And this conference was there to try and come up with some solutions that would work. And a member of the conference went to a village and asked the village the magic question: what would it take to solve this issue for your village? And the answer for this person was surprising. The village came back and said it would take an electric fence. And we didn't expect that to be an answer. So of course, the person said, okay, an electric fence. Tell me how that solves this problem for you. And the villagers said, well, we have crops and the crops are getting constantly trampled and eaten by elephants. And we don't have the funding, the economics to sustain our village. And we don't have the food to sustain the village. And if we had an electric fence, we believe that that would be a solution for this trafficking issue in our community. So the influencer went back, raised a few $1,000s, sent it to the village, came back a year later, and sure enough, the electric fence had solved the trafficking issue for this village. And she goes on to explain, Zoe Chance, the professor, explain why the magic question is so powerful. So first off, the magic question is respectful. So it's respectful because it doesn't impose our solution on somebody else's problem. It gives them the opportunity to give you their opinion. The second reason the magic question is so powerful is because it's creative. It gives you unexpected answers to a solution that nobody may have thought about. And lastly, the magic question is so powerful because it creates a commitment to the success of the outcome. And if somebody gives you that solution, they are now invested in making sure that the outcome is a positive one. So jumping back to how the electric fence solved the trafficking problem, I'm going to take a leap here and say, that the electric fence was a little bit of a tech solution to a very non-tech problem. And we're going to try and move into how that magic question might help you as boards. So first off, you guys are the influencers and leaders for your communities. And I truly believe that the magic question as a manager standpoint can be so valuable in your interactions with each other and with your community members, but that is actually a seminar for another day because that is more about conflict resolution. But the magic question can also be magic because you guys are the problem solvers for your associations. So how can we focus this and relate this to technology for your communities? Let's focus on point number 2, that it's creative. So as a manager, I noticed that there are several areas in association management where I believe technology can really harness and help your communities. So the first one would be communications. I mean, you have so many resources available to you. Look at board meeting attendance. Sometimes I always jokingly tell my boards that if you don't have a lot of attendees, it means that you're doing your job very well, because if the house is packed, somebody's upset about something and there's an issue. So, board members always feel like, oh, we should have lots of people here, but you can use technology to communicate the information that you have available to you as boards through and get that information easily to your community members. So you have companies here today who can help you with websites, online document management, electronic notifications, auto mail processing systems that can make communication mailings more efficient. I know we talked briefly about SB 392, and I think there will be more about that as we move forward with today's presentation. But that new compliance and requirements will allow more utilization of website technology to get that information into the hands of your community members. But it also does require some balance of the opt-in, opt-out lists for communications. So you can utilize technology to help you manage those lists for those who want written communication and those who want electronic. The second area of technology that I think can be helpful for communities is compliance. As you know, we talked about a lot of compliance issues are happening at the state level and changing all of the time. It's hard to keep up with, but tech can help. Technology systems, especially in the association realm, really focus on making sure that the information that is being delivered or how it's being delivered is compliant with the state statutes in order to do that. So solutions can include governing document delivery, electronic delivery of notices, reserve studies, and definitely collections. Collections is an area that is so complicated for associations with so many pitfalls, and technology now can help you make sure that you are being guided in the right way and compliant. We had a client several years ago. There was a change in statute for election posting, and it allowed the new election rules in California to be posted electronically so that you didn't have to supply 20 pages of printed out documents to your members. And we had a client who was looking for an easy and efficient way to securely post those election rules. So technology can help with compliance. Utilize that for sure. The next area is clarity. So technology really can clarify information for you. It makes complicated tasks clearer. There are amazing user interfaces that are available for understanding really complicated association issues, reserve studies, financials. Utilize those systems to help synthesize and make the information more usable for you as board members and for your community members as well. Several years ago, I had an association in downtown Sacramento that was a mixed use association. And so commercial on the bottom and residential on the top. And they were having huge issues with parking. I know none of you have ever had to deal with parking issues. Huge issues with parking. There was just a lot of conflict between the commercial deliveries and people trying to go to work. They actually ended up installing cameras, not for surveillance, but to utilize and understand the information that they got to help fix some issues with their parking. They could use the cameras and the data from the cameras to help them understand when the deliveries were taking place and when people were leaving for work. And it was a super effective tool and really resolved a big conflict for this association, helping them work together. So utilize those technologies that are available to you to help create clarity for some of your important issues. Lastly, I think technology really helps you harness efficiency. Technology makes things faster, stronger, better. You can use technology to save you time. We all know that associations take a lot of time to manage, and technology can help with that. Automated mailing systems, parking enforcement and tracking, the bidding process. I know we're going to hear from somebody today with the bidding process that can be utilize technology to help make that a more safe, secure, and efficient process. We are working with someone who was utilizing paper logs for logging parking infractions and creating technology to make something simpler that is, can move from paper and pencil to a more efficient system to save you time, effort, and energy. Bottom line, technology really saves you money from all of the aspects above. communications, less mailing, less paper. Compliance really can save you on legal costs, legal litigation that may arise from not being compliant with some of the state statutes. Clarity, better understanding and strategic use of your funds, especially with big projects, and definitely efficiency. Time is money. We had an association in another urban area that had very different landscape requirements over several different phases. And they ended up installing a pretty high-tech irrigation system. As we all know, we're all worried about water in California. And this irrigation system was amazing. It would read different zones. It would calculate the moisture in the air. It would adjust and adapt as they moved forward in the seasons. It had a underground fertilizing system that would go through the water irrigation at certain times. And it was an expensive system, but in the end, it really saved this community a lot of money because they saved on water, they saved on landscaping costs, they didn't have as many plant loss turnover. So sometimes the intro to the technology can seem a little daunting, but remember, it really is and can be a huge bottom line money saver for your communities. So circling back to your superpowers, think about in your community what it would take to solve the challenge that you might have through technology. So think creatively. As a board, ask each other the magic question and ask your community, and the answers may surprise you. Think strategically, use your resources. ECHO, obviously, a huge resource. Definitely your association council, the companies that are here today. If we don't have the solution, my guess is we probably know somebody who does. Think openly. You will be amazed at the simple solutions that technology can provide to some of your most challenging issues. If you have an instance in the future where you do use the magic question, I would love to hear if it becomes valuable for you and your community. Please email me. ECHO has my email information, and we would love to hear if it actually can be successful for you. Again, thank you so much for your time, and wishing you and your communities all the best for the future.
That's fantastic, Sonia. Thank you very much for giving us a general overview of technology and solutions in the HOA space. I want to, we're going to now move on to our second presentation, HOA Reserve Funds and Financial Forecasting, presented by Dan Stoden. Dan, please take it away.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you, everyone, for spending a little bit of time on your Saturday to come listen to me and the other speakers we have here. And thanks to everyone else at ECHO for putting on these events. They're incredibly valuable. Yeah, as Dave alluded to, I want to talk to you today about your reserves, particularly what they are, why they're important, and the information that's generated and the data that's generated through things like reserve studies, and how that information ties back to your reserve funds and the future assessments of your homeowners. We're also going to look at how we can maintain healthy reserves through monitoring the correct things in your association. So real quick, a little bit about myself. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a software company called HOME. We're dedicated to providing HOA board members with simple, modern tools to make them more effective, more efficient, as board members in the positions that they are. I myself am a volunteer board member, much like a lot of you on this call, so I'm very familiar with the feelings that go along with serving on an HOA board. Frustration is sometimes one of them, time anxiety, things like that, and even that, like, I'm out of my depth feeling can sometimes creep in. But luckily, we have organizations like ECHO to support us and give us guidance. And given the theme of this event, we have software. So let's take a quick look at what we're going to cover. Yeah, so lots to get through. what exactly are reserves? We're going to touch on that. We're going to cover why they're important and why it's important to contribute to them. We'll dive into the infamous percent funded to look at how we measure the health of your HOA's reserves. And finally, we're going to touch on things that you can keep an eye on to maintain healthy reserves. So yeah, what are reserves? Well, next slide, Connor. According to the Davis-Sterling Act, which is the popular name for the portion of the California Civil Code that governs condos, co-ops, and planned development communities in California, reserves are funds that an association has set aside to pay for the future repair or replacement of or additions to those major components which the association is obligated to maintain. I find it's good to ask this question in the beginning because not everybody that's on an HOA board has a background in finance. And even if you're lucky to have someone on your board that has that background, it's crucial that the board collectively understand the function of the reserves. They understand their function today. They understand the historic performance of your reserves, like how did you get to where you are today? And what the future looks like in terms of assessing your community, right? So what's that plan moving forward? So if it's owned collectively by the association, it's the responsibility of the HOA to repair, replace, or maintain that thing. And so the community has to collectively save money to cover the cost. Notice in there they use the word major. That means it has to last, it has to be something that's got a life expectancy of more than 12 months. Otherwise, it's kind of considered something that goes into your operating budget each year. So knowing what reserves are and what they're for, we should probably look at what they're not as well. So except for temporary borrowing, boards may not expend funds designated as reserves for any purpose other than repair, restoration, replacement or maintenance of all litigation involving the repair, restoration, replacement or maintenance of major components the association is obligated to repair, restore, replace or maintain. Okay. So reserves are a lot like your 401k. It's money that you've set aside for the future. It's not a savings account that you can just kind of typically dip into as needed. There are penalties if you draw from it early. Not tax related penalties like your 401k has, but certainly financial penalties. And those penalties usually affect your homeowners down the line. A lot of the time people dip into reserves, which is basically borrowing money from the future, and they tend not to pay that money back. And that has kind of like a snowball effect on your finances. So why are healthy reserves important? Well, everything in this world deteriorates, right? And the things that make up your building, that your community shares and enjoys are no exception. So HOA board members, when you become a board member, agree to exercise something known as a duty of care when you serve, which means you're striving to uphold both the physical and the financial well-being of the community and its assets. When that duty of care takes a back seat, which can be caused by the deferral of components continually, not replacing things, choosing to forego assessment increases to kind of keep the peace within a community, so to speak, the consequences generally can be devastating. We've seen recently in places like Surfside, Florida, that deferred maintenance can have life-threatening consequences. Homeowners also hate surprises, right? In the HOA world, there are very rarely good surprises. So proactive maintenance and scheduling repairs and replacements leads to fewer operational surprises and financial surprises. We'll look at the financial surprises a little bit more in a moment, but if on January 1st or late in the year you tell all your homeowners association members that their dues are going up significantly, that's not a great conversation to have. But the more information you can get people in a timely manner, because you're monitoring your reserves consistently, the less surprises you'll have, and hopefully the less bad conversations you'll have to have. So measuring HOA reserve health. Unfortunately, there's no kind of overall financial health monitor or measure for the entire association. You have to consider things like historically, how accurate has your expenditures been compared to what you budgeted for on an annual basis, how many of the components you replace each year according to reserve study actually got replaced, and how much financial liability is your HOA carrying. Those are the kind of factors that you have to consider to really gauge the overall health of your financial health of your association. But luckily, reserves specifically do have an indicator, and you may have guessed it, it is that percent funded number that is talked about a lot. So I think it's really useful that we kind of dig into percent funded for a moment. So, 1 second. The Community Association Institute defines percent funded as the ratio at a particular point in time, typically the beginning of a fiscal year, of the actual or projected reserve balance to the fully funded expressed as a percent. That ratio is usually generated by a reserve analyst who visits your building or your community and inspects the components that are within it. This happens every 3 years. In the state of California, or it should, and each year there's an update done that isn't an on-site visit. But during that visit, he or she determines the initial life expectancy of each of the components in your building. They determine how much remaining life those assets have. Combine that with the cash that you have sat in your reserve account today. They extrapolate that data out, and they kind of forecast both the financial health and therefore the risk of your association's funds. Sounds super simple, right? Well, I think it could be a little simpler. So I employed my 3-year-old toddler to draw some pictures on my slides. Here we go. Okay, so let's imagine for a second that your HOA is built a new clubhouse. We don't have to worry about where we got the money to build the clubhouse. It now exists. Okay, so this new clubhouse that we have, it has a roof, it's got 2 windows and a door. Okay, so if we look at the roof for a second, the roof costs $2,000 to install. It's got a life expectancy of 20 years. That means we have to divide 2,000 by 20 and collect $100 from our homeowners each year and put that into reserves. We do this for all of the components. So we look at the windows. The windows, there's 2 of them, so it's $25 each. They're going to last about 5 years. That means in total, we have to divide 50 by 5, and we collect $10 each year and put it into reserves. Last one is going to be the door. The door is going to cost $200. It's got a life expectancy of 10 years. So $20 is what we put into our reserves each year. So in total, that's $130 each year. And this very fictitious clubhouse is 100% funded. Okay, that may not be what 100% funded meant to you. So hopefully this explains it a bit more. There's a few other factors that go into it. Inflation has to be accounted for when we're putting money away. We're kind of glossing over that a little bit just for the sake of example. But so enough funds have to be collected each year to replace the components that are due in that year for replacement, and that means you're considered 100% funded. It doesn't mean you have enough money right now to replace the entire clubhouse. So I didn't mention it at the beginning, but I'm a bit of a data nerd as well. So no presentation of mine would be complete without some graphs. So if we graph this out, we can forecast this. This is what your reserve study does. Usually there are graphs in there. There's a lot of tables and things in there. But basically it's trying to communicate this type of information to you. So this is what I want to call the perfect plan. It's what we just described. So $130 for this clubhouse each year. In this graph, we actually do consider inflation, and we factor that in, and that's what your graph would look like. Now, the reserve study plan and forecast is incredibly unlikely to play out perfectly. Usually because, well, life happens, right? Things break early, things cost more to replace than anticipated. So what happens then? Well, we're going to kind of like kick a few scenarios down to you. So we've got a 12-year-old aspiring NFL player who's accidentally broken both the clubhouse windows. So in this scenario, the HOA draws from the reserve account. It happened late in the year of the first year of the clubhouse. So there are enough funds in there to actually cover the cost of replacing the windows. But come the end of the year, the HOA doesn't recoup the cost of those replacements by increasing the dues more than the standard 3%. So if we take a look and we graph that out, we can see that the reserves drop from what was 100% in that first year down to 62.4. So now they've got $81 left in the reserve account. Now, over time, they kind of replenish the funds. It looks like each year they're getting closer to 100%. So why is there this dip in 2042? Well, the fund has been depleted, but you still have enough money each of the years previous to 2042 to actually pay for the things in those years. But come to 2042, there's a big expenditure that this is when the roof is due. And so that borrowing from the reserves early on has kind of a bigger impact. If we look at the next slide, so what we're going to illustrate here as well is a situation where the HOA didn't increase their dues by the standard 3% the following year. You know, that happens a lot. I've been in HOAs myself where, you know, we've just kind of forgotten sometimes to even communicate to the homeowners that the dues are increasing, or we just let the budget roll over from one year to another, and the increase didn't kind of match inflation. So in that scenario, if we plot this out real quick, we can see that same dip in the beginning, and we get closer to 100. But in that really important year in 2042, there's actually only $6 left in this reserve account. We drop overnight from almost 100% funded to 2.7% funded, which is why understanding your reserves and the data that your reserve study is trying to communicate to you is super important, because literally on the stroke of midnight in 1 year, you can go from a really healthy looking percent funded as an association to a not so healthy looking reserve for your association. And a lot of that is due to something that we call stacking, or a stacking effect. But we'll look at that in a moment. So monitoring your reserves, that's how you avoid this situation. It's good to keep an eye on your reserves and course correct, right? You don't want to set sail in one direction and never touch the wheel again, right? So monitoring your operating account and making sure that you are actively transferring money to your reserves is really important. Your reserve analyst is going to do your reserve analysis based on the funds that you have in your operating account and in your reserve account. And if the funds aren't in your reserve account, and they should be, you may get kind of like an inflated recommendation from your reserve analyst. You have to kind of monitor your spend against your adopted budget to make sure that you're not borrowing from reserves, and look ahead and be proactive when it comes to workload management. And yeah, I saw someone asked about the stacking effect. So that's related to workload management. So if we look at the next slide, you can see here in our fictitious scenario that on that 2042 year, we actually do replace the whole clubhouse. I know we said in the beginning, you don't always have enough money to replace the whole thing, but in this, there's only 3 components. But you can see that in this 2042 year, there's a lot more stuff happening than in other years. Now, this is a byproduct usually of things being assessed as having a life expectancy of multiples of 5. So 5 years for this, 10 years for that, 20 years for this thing, 30 years for that. It just means that, you know, there are years in between where things don't usually align until suddenly they all align at once. And I want to just kind of like show you what this looks like in real life. So this is an actual HOA that's running on our HOME product. And you can see really clearly those years where the components all just kind of like fall on the same year for replacement. So those are going to be expensive years. They're going to be high workload years for your association and your property manager. And so not having these things come as a surprise is incredibly important. And sometimes when you look at your reserve study and it's in a tabular form, it can get lost a little bit in the numbers, right? You can not see these things on the horizon quite as clearly. So it's great if you can use software to kind of bring this information out of there. So yeah, I want to just leave you with a little bit of advice. So if I can, keep accurate records of your replacements when they happen off schedule. Your reserve analyst who's tasked to give you all the information for your forecasting is only as good as the information that they get from you. So make sure that if things do require replacement off of the reserve schedule, you communicate that information to your analyst when you go get your update or your 3-year reserve plan done. Record the actual costs so that you can communicate with your reserve analyst as well and say, it looks like this was what was at the expected cost, but when we actually got this work done, it cost a lot more. And then communicate that accurate information and the information you get from your reserve analyst to your homeowners in the best way possible, just to reduce surprises and any negativity towards the board. Thank you everybody for listening to me. Come visit me and Sam in our breakout room. We'd love to show you more real life examples of HOAs managing their finances and reserve forecasts in home.
Sounds good. So thank you so much, Dan. There actually are several questions in the chat box. I tried answering some of them. I know that you can probably, those that are asking the questions can visit Dan and Samantha in the breakout rooms and maybe get some direct answers to those. So thank you for that. As we heard earlier, SB 392 passed last session that allowed more technology to be used to communicate with the members. We also have AB 1410, which would allow websites to communicate as well, but 1410 takes it a different direction, the right to speak and on the platforms of the HOA. And so there's a question of who do you want to speak and what can you do to limit the speech? This would allow basically anyone to talk or to say whatever they want or a blog or something of that nature. So looks like I lost you a second here. I'm going to just go ahead and talk for a bit. The California legislature has been relatively authoritative on this. The next speaker will address some of these issues and the opportunities to present a number of issues, including security concerns when you have a website. Today, our third presenter, Amar Trivedi, will discuss website communication and security. His presentation is entitled HOA Portal Tips for Success. So Amar, you want to go ahead and take away and give us a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And thanks everyone for joining early in the morning. Good morning, good afternoon. At least it's good afternoon where I am. So we are going to talk a little bit about, as Dave mentioned, that the website has become a major way of communication. It has been for a long time, but now that during the pandemic, it took a completely different turn where it used to be just, hey, just put some information and some pictures and create a HOA website, to now where people can meet in person. Your HOA portal or website becomes a great way of communicating with your members. I'm going to start with just few of the important things or the few of the important terminology as a board member that you should be aware of. One is called the DNS and the other one is called web hosting. Most of the people are aware of a DNS or what a domain name system is. It's essentially your website address. So, www.cnn.com is your DNS or it's your domain name. And then the web hosting is actual physical location of where your files and media and your code and so on and so forth reside. So those are the two important things to remember and understand. What happens is that if you have no control over who has, so let's just say that as a board, you decide to hire a vendor who is going to create a website for you. The vendor then will register your HOA website, let's just say timberlawnhoa.com, with a registration company like GoDaddy or millions of one of them. And the board may not have the access to that particular registrar. So now you are stuck when if you want to get rid of the vendor still owns your domain and all your information, making sure that your host, you have as a board the ability to get your domain name and your host or your hosted files and code and so on is one of the most important things when it comes to creating a website that you can keep and maintain for a long term, on a long-term basis. Also making sure that your vendor, even if they offer hosting, that the hosting, wherever they are hosting your website, is a secure and a reputed web hosting company. There are a lot of smaller hosting companies where your website can get hacked into, or some of the personal information can get out. So making sure that you are hosting your website on a reputed hosting company, that will be really, really important. The second aspect on the same line is the security. And most of the websites are nowadays required to have an SSL. It's a security certificate that says that your website is encrypted and the communication is encrypted, and so nobody can actually get the information that you are passing back and forth. Making sure that your website has, and if I'm sure a lot of people have seen that, if you go to a website and it will say, hey, this website is not secure, do you still want to proceed? Well, make sure that your HOA website has an SSL on it, so that you can go to https:// whatever it is, your HOAname.com. Also make sure that there's a tiered access to the members to update the website content. So it's not like everybody can go in and change the content as they want. Maybe there are, there's specific people who can go in and administer the website, and there are people who can go and edit the content. You can always provide each of the members their own password protected area so that they can communicate in confidence, or they have their own dashboard or their own area where they can download stuff or look at your CCNR and so on and so forth. So you can provide them with a password protected area for each of your homeowner, and making sure that all the passwords are strong and not just 1, 2, 3, 4 or ABCD or California or some of those simple, easily hackable passwords. The next really, really important thing is to make sure that your website is mobile responsive. What that means is that if somebody looks at your website on an iPhone or on their Android smartphone, they have the similar experience as if they were on a desktop, making sure that they don't have to go or scroll horizontally and vertically in order to see the content all the time. That just makes a horrible experience, and a lot of people will not like that kind of experience. You can go to URL search.google.com/test-mobile friendly, put your website in there and see if it's mobile responsive or not. Google will tell you if it's not and what you should do to fix it. If you have hired a vendor to make your website, make sure that you get it fixed. Also, the important things like phone, email, URL, making sure that they are clickable and they have enough space so that when somebody tries to put their finger in order to get to the URL or the email address, that there are no fat finger issues where they're trying to get to the phone number and it keeps saying that taking them to a different website or a different page. And the biggest thing is to make sure that your website, you can try at least on 4 or 5 devices, the most popular ones, maybe on iPhone and Android phone and some of the other versions of those phones. The next one is to make sure that you have a really up-to-date community calendar and a news section, making sure that your all the important events can be easily seen by the members. Making sure that if there's an event that has an agenda, you have added the link to the agenda with the event, so that it's not something that they have to go and search for. One of the things that make it really easy is whatever are your upcoming events. So showing your next 3 or 4 upcoming events on the homepage, so that people don't have to log in or go somewhere else to see what's upcoming in the next month or the next 4 things that are going to happen, and an updated news section. And the news section can be anything from what's upcoming to whatever the other things that you are doing in the community, or making sure that you are making them aware that we are going to upgrade blah blah blah, or we are going to work on this area, and so on and so forth. It can also be just the activities that were done in the whatever happened in the recent past events. The next one is making sure that your website is easily maintainable. One of the easiest way to turn off all your members from going to the website is not keeping your content fresh. If I keep coming to the website, and if it has the same old stale information, I'm going to stop coming pretty soon. So making sure that your site is always showing the latest and the most pertinent information for your homeowners or your members. Also making sure that whatever vendor that you have picked in order to make your website, your content is easily updatable, so that you are not going to the vendor for every small little thing that you want to do. Make sure that you have a way of adding news, or adding your calendar events, or just updating certain aspects of your homepage, and so on and so forth. Also, adding your new homeowners, or changing the username and password for some of your homeowners, making sure that that doesn't take very long to do that. Again, the less number of things that the board members or the assigned committee has to do, the better. Also, making sure that you have a hierarchy of people who have the ability to administer the website versus those who can update the content. Also making sure that for the members, put a limit on how many times they can try to log in. That again helps with making sure that your website remains secure. So what that means is that after 4 or 5 unsuccessful attempts, you essentially just tell them that, hey, you need to call in or send an email or communicate with us in order to reset your password. We want to make sure that you are trying to access the website. And again, the big thing is that let's not make everybody an admin. Let's just make those 2 or 3 or few number of people who really need to be the administrator of the website are actually the administrator of the website. The next one is making sure that you have somewhere where you are showing off your community, really taking good pictures and putting them on the website as a way to attract the new potential members, or just people who are looking at the community. That actually helps a lot when you have the ability to put really nice images or pictures that represent your community. Also, making sure that you tell the story of your HOA and whatever is happening. Again, that can be part of a few pages, or you can just make it as part of your homepage. And then the last one will be to, just kind of give a sense of what your community is doing, or what your community is about. This is actually something that is not really required, but can be really helpful, especially in the pandemic times when people are not able to meet in person. An online polling capability within your portal can be very useful if there are small issues, or if there are things that you want to gather information or gather ideas about. You can have an online polling so that people, you can pose a question, and your members can vote on those things. Allow each member only to vote once, and this kind of can eliminate few of those times when we don't have to meet in person. This is actually more important since the pandemic. The next one is in my opinion, the most important thing, and is the accessibility of your website. More and more people are realizing, and there are a lot more lawsuits for all kinds of website owners for their websites not being able to access by people with disabilities. And there are different types of disabilities, and you have to make sure that your website can be accessed by people with different levels of disability. When it comes to creating an accessible website, it's not that all the web agencies or the web vendors are aware of what accessibility is, or web accessibility is, and then what are the standards that they have to follow in order to make a website accessible. If you are going to hire a web agency, please make sure you ask them about accessibility, and when they're done with your website, if your website will be accessible, or at least will be close to being completely accessible. Again, there are certain standards that you have to follow when you are adding a video or forms or images on your website. Make sure that you follow those standards so that your website can be accessed by people with disabilities. Also, if you are adding your agenda or certain things in PDFs, you have to make sure that those PDFs are also accessible for people with disabilities. This has become a huge issue across different sectors and different industries. So make sure that your website is not, it essentially is accessible for people with disability. There's an American Disabilities Act, which has a section called Section 508. And a lot of large and small organizations are being sued because their website doesn't follow the 508 compliance rules. Few miscellaneous things that you can add to your website. Accessibility statement. This actually just typically says that, hey, we have tried our best to make this website as accessible as possible. If you have come across some content that is not accessible, here is the email or phone number that you can reach out to us, and we will try to provide you with an accessible alternative. It can be that, let's just say that there's a PDF that is not accessible. You can then send them an accessible PDF. Or let's just say there's an image that doesn't have the tag that explains certain things which are important for the member to know. If you can then send them an explanation of what that image is about, and so on. Also, the privacy statement is really important. That states that all the information is private. You have tried your best to make sure that your website is secure, and so on and so forth. Also, if there are specific things that you want to add on your content usage policy that you cannot take the images from your website and use it for some other purposes, or this is all private and copyrighted information, and so on and so forth. The last is the most important thing, Google Analytics tracking code that tells you exactly how your website is being used, what are the most popular pages, who are going where, and that can be really, really useful when you are thinking of updating your website or redesigning your website at some later point in your HOA lifetime. So that's my quick presentation. If there are any questions that I can answer, I would invite you to join the breakout session. Thank you again.
Awesome, that's great. I want to say thank you to our presenters, and you're doing a wonderful job. I hope there's some good conversation going on. I popped into a few sessions. They were very, very interesting. So thank you for that. We're going to get into the next session. We have 2 more presenters, and so welcome back. I do want to say that you can talk to these, our professional service providers are here to ask your questions, but also to talk about their products and services. So please interact with them. Even if your management firm is doing a lot of this process, you can get information. You can always talk to these folks. You don't have to use your management firm's vendors. So that's one thing that I think is a lot of HOAs are confused about. But you can, board members, you can ask them to use a different processor or a different server or whatever, however you want to do it. So welcome back. For our 4th presentation, we will cover the bidding process, and that's always a fun one. Tim Hoover has a great story, and I read part of it. So I'm gonna turn this over to Tim. It's a really interesting process to try to make the bidding process fair and consistent. He's going to talk a little bit about how the process works. So Tim, what's a statement of work, or a scope of work, I should say?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dave. We're really glad to be here today, and this is a touchy topic. Bidding usually relates back to money and spending money. So we have the joy of trying to solve that problem in our process. But my background is in construction. I'm a general contractor, own a landscaping business, general contracting business, and 2 technology companies. I was born into the HOA marketplace. Been doing HOA work my entire life. My dad started our landscaping business, and 95% of our customers are HOAs. So I get the fun joy of talking about how you're going to spend your money and the best process, and finding the right way to do that. So let's kind of dive into it here. So why do properties go out to bid? Number 1 is they're looking for competitive bids. So you're going to do a roofing project that might cost you $500,000. It would not be of fiduciary responsibility to not go to bid. So going out to bid for a large project is wise and recommended. And generally, you're going to want to get 3 bids when you go out to bid. The second reason is price shopping on an existing customer for budgetary purposes. So you may have a budget, you might be tight with your finances, and you have an existing maintenance contractor, for example, that might be asking for an increase in their contract. And so you're going to go out to bid on that, possibly because of your personal budget for the HOA. That's a cautionary, it's a very, very touchy-feely topic right now because of inflation and costs increasing. So, we just want to be cognitive of, hey, if you have a good vendor that's been with you for a long time, that's giving you a 3 to 5 to 7% increase, you may consider just keeping them and understand that a budget cost increase may apply. Or you might not be happy. So finally, the third one is you're looking to make a change. You might have a contractor or management company that's just not servicing your property to the best of their ability. And so at this juncture, you're sick and tired of the relationship and you're ready to go make a change. And that's why properties go out to bid. Where do I or we start? So what does the process look like when you go out to bid, and where do you start with that process? If you have a management company, generally those management companies have vendor lists or preferred vendors that they work with, that they have relationships with, that they'll recommend to your association. In some of those times, those vendors are good vendors, or sometimes they're not. And there's a lot of stuff that's kind of happening behind the scenes that I'll dive into with my contractor's hat on in a little bit. But be caution, like tread lightly with property management vendor lists. They could be good or they could be bad. We'll talk about that in a minute. Referrals. You might have a neighboring property, or your friend lives in an HOA that has a service provider, a really good management company, or they've got a really good contractor that's working there. Referrals is another place where they start. Or internet, you could be going and looking at Google searches or Yelp reviews. Another place to where a lot of those opinions are subjective, and people have, there could be a really good contractor on a job that has just been torn apart on the internet. So some of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-star reviews are generally coming from a subjective position. And so, that's really why referrals are probably the best place to find these, to find new management companies or new contractors to service your properties. So this is where you start the bidding process. This is probably going to be the core of our discussion this morning. The importance of a well-defined scope of work. Okay, so you're going to go out to bid. You currently have let's just call it a landscaper that you're not happy with. They're not providing your needs. They're not meeting your expectation. Where do we start in this process? There's a misconception in our industry that a community manager or a property manager is also a construction expert. Generally, they're not. A construction expert or a construction manager is a completely separate job description, set of expertise, knowledge, experience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a big misconception on the fact that a community manager is expected to be the construction expert. And a lot of times that really leads to nothing but problems in the future down the road. And some community managers pretend to be this construction expert. Some people don't, but we have got a lot of people that are calling the shots, and what happens at that juncture is potentially a non-experienced community manager that is pretending to be a construction expert may lead you down a path of possibly choosing the wrong decision maker or the wrong contractor based upon their lack of knowledge for construction. And so it's really important to have a well-defined scope of work. How do we meet customer expectations if there's a poorly defined scope of work? So how is it even possible to actually meet the board's expectation if the scope of work is poorly defined? And so a lot of the problems that are related to bidding are related to a miscommunication or a poorly communicated set of expectations. And again, the board isn't necessarily the expert as well. Generally, out of 5 board members, there's one that has some sort of project management background or some sort of construction background. But a lot of the times, it really comes down to clarifying this expectation. And if it's not well defined in a scope of work, then you can expect change orders to come. So I'll give you a quick story as far as like me as a contractor, with my contractor hat on. So I was asked to bid a large slope renovation project, and the community manager came to me and they said, "Hey, we'd like you to bid this project." I said, "Well, do you have a scope of work?" And they said, "No, we'd like for you to define that scope of work." So I spent a lot of time, energy, effort, money putting that scope together. Just so happens I have a background in design beyond my other expertise. But so I went out, I designed the entire scope of this large slope project, and I put a very detailed scope of work together as if I was managing the process. And my bid came in somewhere around $100,000 to to do the job. And that was a very pricey project. And of course, the board is going to look at that number and make a good decision, which they should have, and say, hey, we're going to go out to bid. But now what they're doing is they're going to take my expectation, or they're going to take my scope of work as a contractor, and they're going to take it to bid. So what does that do relationally between me as a contractor and that board? Is it makes me feel used. You know, the reality is I had that maintenance contract, so the board could push me around in some regard, but at the same time, what it did is it caused a wedge between me and that customer, because they ultimately took my scope of work and they took it out to bid. And I ended up losing the bid to another competitor, and this really made me frustrated. And so what we did is we kind of created this entire platform of what we did. And I don't want to go into what we do today. I just want to kind of continue to educate you here, because that's what Echo's about, is education, advocacy, community. And so for me, I'm educating you on the feelings and the things that happen as a contractor that are wedges between relationships between contractors and boards. But ultimately what ended up happening is the contractor that came in below me was a little bit less in price, about 10% less. So they came in at about 90 grand. My bid was around 100 grand. And I just said, there's no way. I built this thing super tight. My number was on the dot. And this contractor who got the work came in at 90, and 3 weeks into the job, the contractor says, well, we didn't include this in our scope of work, when it was well defined by me previously. And so now their scope ended up, the whole project cost ended up being around 120 grand, where my initial scope and my initial bid was 100 grand. So the moral of the story is, you know, I was undercut, and then the association ended up going through the process of change orders and working with the manager and the mistrust and all the things that just kind of collapsed as an entirety, in its entirety, you know, created an uncomfortable situation for all parties involved, except for the person that was awarded the bid, that ended up making out with an extra 20 grand in profit versus where my bid was at 100 grand. So it's very important to have a well-defined scope of work. And who is defining the scope of work? In this scenario, I recommend, you know, the association hire a construction manager, or they hire an independent expert that just comes out and builds the scope. And people are always like, oh, why don't we just get you know, let's just use our existing vendor. They'll build the scope. We'll get something for free. But in the reality, there's no such thing as free. And so at the end of the day, everybody's paying more money for a bad experience, and nobody's happy. Board member challenges and expectations during the bidding process: budgets, assessments, interpersonal conflicts, and special interests in price sharing. So budgets are always the hottest topic. You may have an existing contractor in landscaping or, you know, your building maintenance contractor, or your pool service provider, or your management company. But really, budgets are the most touchy-feely topic when it comes to the bidding process, and where do you even start with setting a budget is a very difficult thing. So really having an expert follow alongside of you to help you establish a proper budget, and that proper budget is going to be based upon a scope of work. So if you have a poorly defined scope of work, how are you going to have a proper budget set for a job? Number 2 is assessments. You as board members have the duty of managing projects, or making decisions, not managing projects, but making decisions on behalf of your entire membership. And so there's a challenge associated to that, because the rest of the membership is looking at you saying, hey, why are we getting an assessment increase of $5 to $10 to $20 a month for our monthly dues? It's really because you're trying to buffer your costs over a period of time. And the last thing you want to do is get into a roofing project, and you're spending $500,000 for a roof, and you have to go to your entire membership and say, oh, by the way, we hired this contractor that came in low, and now we have to have an additional assessment to cover the cost to finish this job. And everybody's now looking at you as a board and saying, like, what was your problem? Why did you make this decision? There's a lot of pressure on your backs and your shoulders. So, you know, that's a challenge that you all have, is this assessment, making sure. And so just let's talk about maintenance contracts versus actual one-off construction jobs. So like a maintenance contract, there's been a problem in our industry over the past 7 to 10 years where budgets have been whittled down, meaning there's been a ton of turnover with management companies and with service providing businesses to whittle down the budget to actually feel like you're getting a really good deal. But at the end of the day, you're getting poor service. And so, you know, time equates to labor, and labor equates to a dollar amount. And there's certain dollars and ratios to labor to actually have companies that are profitable. And so assessments are going to come into you as a challenge at some point in the future, because you're going to have to go to your members and say, hey, we need to increase our dues by $10 a month, by $20 a month. And so when you're going out to bid, having those conversations, you know, there's a lot of pressure. So, you know, part of what we do is we help solve some of those challenges with the board level of assessments and dealing with those things. Interpersonal conflicts, those are board member to board member issues, and they exist at every board level. That's why there's 5 board members. Boards are actually democracy, and that's why we vote. And so not everybody's going to agree on everything, and that's an okay thing. That's what creates a better decision and a productive decision. And so really, there's interpersonal conflicts that happen during the bidding process of who are we going to choose? Should we choose this contractor that's 10 grand a month, or should we choose this guy that's 8 grand a month? And having those productive conversations are things that are going to happen as a result of a bidding process. And so working through those things and talking through them and being adults and making educated decisions, you may end up compromising, but those are things that you're doing on behalf of an entire association, and that's your fiduciary responsibility to come together to make good decisions. Special interest and price sharing is a conflict that also exists at the board member level. There's a lot of management companies and service providing businesses that are there's special interest with some board members. They're taking them golfing, they're taking them and wining and dining them, and they're buying them off essentially to gain votes. Really not much different than the United States government. So that's a challenge that we're all dealing with in this industry. And special interest is definitely a problem. And so is price sharing of, hey, this bids this bids this, talk to your other bidders, share the information. All the prices are coming in from apples to oranges. Nobody's understanding what we're expecting to do here. Ultimately leads to a bad decision at the end of the day. We'll move to the next slide. Project cost, some external factors that affect price and quality, market consolidation, inflation, and labor shortages. So these are all things that are happening within our industry, within the HOA marketplace specifically. Over the past 10 years, there's been a massive influx of private equity into the industry, and market consolidation is happening all over the place. That meaning there's private equity funds or large corporate entities that are national platforms that are buying up regional management companies, and they're buying up regional service providing businesses. And as a result, what's happening is pricing is being squashed, and so is quality. Let me give you an example. If I'm the largest landscaping business in the United States, I have the ability to hedge my pricing across the United States. And I might have a very profitable business in Denver, Colorado, that's actually going to carry my pricing in California if I have a lower margin. So they're hedging across multiple industries or multiple market sectors. And ultimately what's happening is pricing is declining and quality is declining. And that's why we have so much turnover in our industry. And so that's some of the external factors that are not seen and not discussed that are causing a negative impact on the quality of service to these HOAs. Inflation, obviously, that's the hot topic that's going on around the United States right now. Cost of goods is increasing. So this is going to increase our project costs. This increases our cost of goods sold, meaning, plumbing, gas, insurance, everything is going up. And so these are external factors that we don't necessarily have control over, which are going to lead to you having to make decisions as far as assessment increases or dues increases that are going to have to be absorbed by somebody. And so usually the paying customer is the one that needs to absorb these costs. And lastly, labor shortage. So we have about 200 employees for our business, our landscaping business. And I'll tell you firsthand experience that we have had just an extremely challenging time finding good labor. We pay our guys well, we give them insurance benefits, we take care of them, vacation, all of it. And to find good, long-lasting employees is a really, really challenging thing. And so ultimately, labor is the core foundation of contracting. And if you don't have good labor, then you can expect that the product is not going to be a good quality product. And in order for a company to make money and to stay in business and to pay for our kids' schooling and our food and going on vacation every once in a while, as well as management companies, we have to increase our cost. And so these are things that the boards have to understand. And there's a duty to the HOA to understand and communicate properly to the association of, hey, this is why we're increasing our dues by $10 a month. And so those are things that affect the project costs. How to make the best decision, apples to apples comparison, meaning if you're going out to bid, you're going to get apples and oranges across the board. We created a system to prevent this. We created a system to create an apples to apples process where all bidders are clear of your expectations as the board, where the management company is on the same page and everybody's working together to achieve ultimately the best result. Be cautious of the low bidder. Low bid equals change orders. Generally, not all bidders are going to produce a bad product. All low bidders are going to produce a bad product, but a lot of them do. And so be very cautious when selecting your bidders. And a lot of that's going to go back to the budget. If you have to make an adjustment to your budget to accommodate, that's possibly something you may want to consider because low bidders usually equate to change orders. And interview bidders. A lot of HOAs don't necessarily take the time because it's a volunteer position to go through this process to interview the right people. And so interviewing the bidders is a very, very important thing. And when I say interview the bidders, it's interviewing the project managers of those companies. A lot of service providing businesses and a lot of property management companies are going to send in sales teams that are fantastic at selling you something. But the reality is, as soon as they sell you that product, they're going to get a commission and you're never going to see them again. And you're going to be stuck with somebody who's less qualified than the person that gave you all these unfulfilled promises. And so interviewing the bidders and actually interviewing the person that you're going to be working with, whether that's your property manager or your project manager, is a very important thing to do. So take the time, interview the bidders, and that should help make a better decision because that's the person that you're going to be working with, not the salesperson that sold you a bill of goods. So thank you for taking the time. I'd love to see you in our breakout session. We have a solution to a lot of these issues that I just spoke of. Simply Seal is a platform that was created to digitally seal bids until all bids are submitted or a deadline expires. The intention of that is to create a level playing field for everybody that's participating in the process. Prior to submitting the bid, all bidders have the ability to communicate via the platform through a scope Q&A process, which is anonymous, and that helps better define the scope of work. So you're actually using all three contractors that are bidding on the platform to help refine the scope of work to meet your expectations, and you're involved with that process as well as a board member to be able to answer some of those questions to make sure that everybody's bidding apples to apples. Thank you for your time, and we appreciate listening to my spiel. Again, we are grateful for you and your relationships. You've got a really hard job to do as volunteers. So thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Tim. We appreciate your time and your presentation. We're going to move on to the next presenter. Mitchell Drimmer and Alisher Sabarov. Sorry, I'm destroying your name. I'm sorry about that, Alisher.
It's okay, no problem, Dave.
Axela is an excellent organization, and they have a lot of knowledge about collections. I popped into the presentation during the breakout session. Excellent information that I didn't know about. So let's turn this over to Mitchell right now. So Mitchell, you want to go ahead and start your presentation?
Mitch, I think that you have a technical, you are on mute. First of all, you have to unmute yourself. Or you can't hear?
It looks like you can't hear it. So let me go ahead and.
We got you, Mitch. We're good.
Oh, you're.
Use the chat room, Mitch, if you can, and tell us what's going on. Do you have an issue there, Connor? Are you working on it?
I am attempting to. There's not much I can do from my end. Okay. Sorry about the delay, folks.
All right. Some people asked about getting the slides. The slides will be sent within 7 days of for the general session within 7 days, and we'll talk to the professional service providers about providing their slides so that we can get those to you. I think a couple of people wanted the slides of some of the presentations, so that is another thing. We'll have to get approval from the individual vendors and to do that. I assume that would be okay with most, if not all of them. So and Connor's working on that now. Alisher, you want to go ahead and maybe start? Or
Yes, I can go ahead and start while Mitch will have to log out and log back in. It's going to help him.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Alisher Sabirov. I'm a VP of SSL Technologies. I run our California office. So we service nationwide, and we also have a lot of clients here in Northern and Southern California. So I myself attend board meetings along with my boss, Mitch Dreamer, who will be hopefully joining me shortly. Okay, Connor, can you please start the slide? So we're going to be talking about fiduciary duties of the board of directors. And first thing that comes to mind, how come the board of directors are all volunteers? They're not getting paid, and on top of everything and spending their time, on top of everything, they have fiduciary duties. And who they owe these fiduciary duties to? The law says that the board of directors are officers of the corporation. So association that you guys are running is a business. And as such, you are officers and you owe fiduciary duties to the benefit, for the benefit of the members of the association. So, and here we're gonna touch, previous presenters have been talking about fiduciary duties. I'm gonna just touch upon them, and we're gonna start with duty of loyalty and duty of care. Another duty that the board of directors owe is act within the scope of authority. I also want to mention a business judgment rule that the board of directors have to adhere to. So what's the business judgment rule? Business judgment rule is a presumption that a director or officer acted on, number one, informed basis, number two, in good faith, and number three, in honest belief that that action was in the best interest of a corporation. So let's take it to the delinquent assessments. So for example, if association has delinquent assessments and you didn't address delinquent assessment, inaction is not protected. However, decision to refrain from action is protected, which means that for whatever reason you have delinquency and you ask your manager to bring a delinquency report, he brings it to the board of directors, you review it, and you make a decision to refrain from sending them to collections. So this decision of the board of directors will be protected. However, if you don't act on a delinquent account and you just ignore them, that might be an unprotected action. Next slide, please. So reserve studies. Dan already touched upon reserves. I just want to say that,
I'm back.
Hi, Mitch. So I started the process. I started the presentation, and we are at reserve
can you
studies
hear
and
me?
budgeting. Yes, we can hear you.
We can
Can you
hear
hear
and
us?
see you.
You may not be able to hear us.
Yeah.
Mitch?
He definitely has a problem with his technology.
We can hear you, Mitch.
Just keep going, Alisher.
Okay. So as I said, Dan touched upon reserve studies and budgeting, and all I can tell you that assessment is the lifeblood of the association. The board of directors should pay attention to assessments, and if you have any delinquent accounts, you have to basically address them. And Connor, can you please give us a next slide? Good practice for HOA budgeting. Look at past budgets, send requests for proposal, evaluate maintenance and utility cost, update insurance, account for reserves, review financial statements, get approval, inform homeowners. That's everything's been touched upon. So we go to the next slide. I want to get to the collections part as soon as possible.
I'm back. Carry on.
Okay, so what happens that when someone doesn't pay? Mitch, you're gonna tell us what
Well,
happens if
okay,
someone...
let me pick it up. Well, if someone doesn't pay, I think all managers and all board members understand that there are no free lunches. So if somebody doesn't pay, we're going to have a couple of things happen. Number one, we're going to have a reduction of services in the community association, or we're going to have an increase in assessments. We're going to have a reduction in the property values. And of course, we're going to have people who are not enjoying the residential experience and will go delinquent. They think that they're in a rental apartment. Many people are not really in the mindset of community living. They believe that assessments are equivalent to rent, that if you're not happy in your condominium, you should not pay it, like a rent strike. But you're a stakeholder in a company, in a building. You can't do that. It cannot be done. It should not be done. And it is a penalty and a punishment for those good paying owners. So when you don't have a good budget and when you don't properly make assessments or a budget for assessments, you're going to have a cash shortfall. A cash shortfall will be painful. Next. All right, I got a question here. What about if the home burnt down? Does the HOA need to collect assessments? Guess what? Yes. You got insurance. It's your home. It's your responsibility. You're a part of the community. When your home burnt down, did it cost less to maintain the pool? Did it cost less for the insurance of the association? Did any expenses from the budget go down? No. So yes, Surfside, the whole building collapsed. Now, are they paying assessments? No. Technically speaking, they still should be until the organization probably already has been dissolved from a legal point of view. Carry on, Alisher.
So whenever you have delinquent assessments and you've tried to address this issue and delinquent assessments continue to grow, what are your options? And it says here, bring in professionals. So you can either try to talk to attorneys that services your association and inquire if they help out with collections of delinquent assessments. As far as I know, not that many attorneys, they involved in collections because it's a very, very litigious sphere. And you can send it to a trustee company for the judicial or non-judicial foreclosure process, or you can give it to a company like ours that do the actual collections.
A collection solution is different from a legal solution. If somebody is not paying, an association will usually send some courtesy letters advising them that they're not paying. And let me warn everybody out there, if you're a manager and you send a courtesy letter, do not use the words demand. Do not use any language that may seem like it is a demand letter, because then you will be subject to the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. Number two, be doubly sure and doubly safe. And if you send out a courtesy letter, send it out on the letterhead of the association that you're working for, and sign it not by your management company, for the board of directors, because the association is a first party creditor. So they're not as subject to the FDCPA as management companies. With this new Rosenthal Act and the new Regulation F, the lawyers are going to start coming after management company for violations of the FDCPA. So from a practical point of view, it does not make sense to go straight to the nuclear option, as I call it, the most draconian thing you could do, taking people's homes away. And number two, this is a way to get people engaged, because I know all of you managers out there, and a lot of you board members hear the same thing. Nobody ever, membership will tell you, nobody told me, nobody advised me, nobody wrote of it. What we do is we engaged. Let's see what it looks like when we engage. Oh, what is the FDCPA? The FDCPA is a law that was written in 1978 called the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. It is a federal law. It is a law that is parallel in every state of the union. If a state doesn't have their own Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, then you are obligated to follow the federal one. And usually the federal one mirrors the state ones exactly. All right, let's see what it looks like, collections. Next slide, please. Well, here we're going to do the collections process flowchart. Now, in most cases today, a lot of you nice people, you'll have somebody delinquent and you send them those courtesy letters, which I just gave you some advice. And by the way, for managers and associations, if you're self-managed, in your very last courtesy letter that you're going to send out, before you send them to either an attorney or a fine collections company, you need to put in some new language according to this new Regulation F. If you remember earlier, I told you that there needs to be an opt-in for text messaging and emails, okay? So in your final letter, we have language that basically says, and you could write me and I will be more than happy to send you this language, that opts people in for the professionals, for your attorney, for your collection company, for your management company. Because once you start the quote licensed collection process, you need to be able to have the people opt in, and the opt-in can be done automatically on the last warning letter that you send them, and we will be very happy to provide the language that you should put in that last warning letter. And we'd also be very happy to provide you with a template for a uniform collections policy. So let's talk about the collections process right now. What does it take to get it done? Well, of course, we're going to do, if you come into our session, we'll tell you all about it. But quickly, we do an underwriting. We get the fact pattern. We understand. Valerie, I'll get you that language. You just got to contact me after. Okay, not a problem. I just got a little message. Me and Valerie became friends. Thank you, Valerie. We'll get to the contact information. Write my name down, Mitchell Drimmer, and you could Google me. And if I don't pop up all over the place with all sorts of HOA stuff, then something's wrong with Google. Thank you. Thank you, Connor. All right. So the process is pretty simple. Instead of when somebody goes delinquent and you send out the courtesy letters, instead of sending them straight to lien and trustee and take away their homes, let's engage them. Let's talk with them. Let's call them. Let's send them a notice. Let's report them to credit bureaus. Let's have an email campaign, multi-channel efforts. Notify their banks that they're not paying. And if you come to my session, I'll tell you how that works, where we can actually get the lenders to pay for people's assessments. And then if we have to file a lien, we'll file a lien. And then if that doesn't work, we'll continue calling and continue working. And if we can't move the needle, and if your collection solution is not moving the needle, then you have to move and make a decision whether to foreclose or not. And what does a foreclosure look like in California? Next slide, please. Now, since I'm a New York / Miami guy, I'm going to let the head of my California division, explain to you how foreclosures work in California, both judicial and non-judicial. Alisher?
Okay, first of all, I would love to bring attention of the board members that in order for us or for any other company, including attorneys, to record the lien, the board have to meet during open meeting and vote on recording a lien. Recording a lien is a very important process in the collections, because once you record the lien, you secure association interest. Once the lien is placed against the delinquent homeowner's property, homeowner cannot sell the property, cannot refinance the property without satisfying the lien. So that's why we always tell the board of directors it is very important that you send accounts to collections per your collection policy. And when the time comes, the lien needs to be recorded, and it will secure your interest, including in the cases when even homeowner files bankruptcy, since the debt now is not his personal obligation and becomes part of the property. A collection company or an attorney can continue with his collection efforts, and he can attempt to collect the full amount of the debt, and it won't be wiped out during the bankruptcy proceedings. So now, as you can see, we divided the process into phase 1 and phase 2 of the collection flowchart. So phase 1 is a pre-foreclosure steps, which includes FDCPA collection demand notice, pre-lien letter, and recordation of lien. Now we're talking about phase 2 of the collection process, when the board decides that it's time to escalate the matter into the foreclosure. And I'm going to cover it I'm going to talk about the judicial or non-judicial foreclosure process. First of all, in order for the file to be to satisfy the requirements to be eligible for the foreclosure, the outstanding balance has to be over $1,800 in assessments only. A lot of board members and managers think that $1,800 is a requirement for the lien to be recorded against the property. This is not correct. So $1,800 requirement of 12 months delinquency is the requirement for the association to start the foreclosure, the actual foreclosure process against the delinquent unit. How it happens? The board of directors has to meet during their executive session and vote whether they want to escalate the matter and start the foreclosure process, whether judicially or non-judicially. And it should, basically, the account should be over $1,800 in assessments only. Once they made a decision, they send it to their collection company for action. So whenever we get the decision from the board of directors, we have to follow and comply with some procedural requirements. So first of all, we're going to have to personally serve the delinquent homeowner with the board's decision to foreclose. Usually, it triggers an actions right away from the delinquent homeowner. They pick up the phone, they call us, and they say, like, what can I do to bring account current? Is there any option for a payment plan? How can I solve it? So we believe that escalating in some instances should be these decisions should be made by the board of directors.
Right. If I may interrupt you just for a second, I will tell you that this is not 2008. There's equity in these properties. In 2008, the whole market crashed, and who are you going to collect from? Why would somebody pay? Nobody paid. We were waiting for banks to foreclose. But property values have gone sky high, and I'm talking California, they've gone super sky high. So nobody is going to lose a home with equity in it for want of a few hundred or a few $1,000s, unless, of course, you're burying them in so much collection fees. So I will tell you that in the last 4 years, yes, we have started collections processes, but only it's only a small fraction of what we need to recover from what we couldn't recover previously. We have only gone so far as to take the title for the benefit of an association a handful of times. We bring the delinquent owners, we try and engage, and we try and talk to them nice and work with them and kindly get them to pay. But after a little while, you just have to take them to foreclosure, to the edge of a cliff, and then they pay. And it's really heartbreaking, because they could have gotten out of this situation for a few $100s, but they chose to ignore it. And then when they're about to lose their homes, it costs them a few $1,000s. Not good idea. So I'm talking about a value chain. What is the value chain? First, you start with your courtesy letters, which your management company may charge $25, $10, $15. I have no idea. And then when that doesn't work, you use a merit-based situation, collection agency. I would like you to use mine, but there's others. And then if that doesn't work, then this is where you have to go, what Alisher is showing you right now. And then you'll get paid, or you'll get the title for a unit. Carry on, Alisher, I'm sorry.
So once the board of directors' decision to foreclose has been served to the delinquent homeowner, the next step would be to record a notice of default. Notice of default, basically, once notice of default is recorded, association will be foreclosing in the same manner as any other bank or senior lender will be foreclosing on the property. So once notice of default is recorded, there is a quiet period of 90 days for the homeowner to bring account current. After 90 days expires, association can choose to set the HOA foreclosure sale, and we're going to be in the foreclosure sale, but the board has to remember that in California, there is a 90-day redemption period. Even if association forecloses on the property, the delinquent homeowner will have another 90 days to redeem the property back. And that's how the foreclosure process happens here.
All right, let's the next slide. Final thoughts. All right, I'd like to say that, how much time do I have left there, Dave? Connor?
You have about 3 minutes.
All right. Let's say a unit is foreclosed upon. You were working on it. You gave it to your attorney, and the bank was foreclosing on it at the same time that you were foreclosing on it. Well, that never should have happened in the first place. If somebody is delinquent and you've gone through the entire process that we go through, engaging, calling, talking, collection agency process, and it still isn't going to be resolved, the owner may also be in foreclosure, or the bank may also be foreclosing on the owner. So do you foreclose if the bank is foreclosing? And the answer is no. Why would you foreclose and have a race with the bank to the courthouse steps? Because once the bank forecloses, remember, they have the priority lien over you. So when they foreclose, they're going to take that property. You're going to be wiped out of your money, and that's the end. And your attorney will say, well, sorry, the bank beat you to it. Here's my bill. Now, that will not happen if you get a proper collections company, because what will happen is if the bank forecloses and takes title to a unit, it should be monitored and trace the sale of that unit. In other words, there is a program called REDS provided by HomeWise Docs that will tell you when a property is sold. If a property is sold and was in collections with your collection solution, that collection solution would do well to follow that unit, see if it was sold. When it is sold, see if there was a surplus, and then petition the court for the benefit of the association to recover that surplus, and the association may not have to take the big hit. Your attorney is going to tell you to write it off if the bank forecloses ahead of you. And even if the bank doesn't foreclose ahead of you, and even if there is no foreclosure, and the association does foreclose, did you get any money? No, you got an encumbered title. Do you have to sell those units that you foreclose upon? Absolutely not. You don't have to pay for, do you have to pay for them? The answer is absolutely not. You don't have to pay for the loan, but you can sell if that unit has equity in it. And if the owner was foolish enough to allow their home to be foreclosed upon with equity in it, the association still can capture that equity through a surplus sale. So that is how good collections is done for community associations. Please join us when we have our breakout session, and we'll show you more, and we'll show you our technology, and we will allow you to ask us. Well, you can ask questions now. We'll try and answer your questions. Thank you very much.